Hello, good to see you.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good to see you. I'm doing well. Doing
Yeah, I
well.
feel like this is definitely our first time talking to each other.
Yes.
I
Other
mean,
than
communicated
through,
on
you know,
Twitter, X,
yeah.
whatever we call it, and you and I have a lot in common. Actually, I think we have what do we have
Mhm.
going for us? Lutheran,
Yes.
principal thing. We have the interest in wrestling. I think, although mine is not really an organic
I,
interest. That was
I, yeah, and we can discuss that, I suppose, if you want. Um,
Yeah, no, that's something like my husband kind of clockwork oranged me into watching. I had to. I only watch it if he does, but it doesn't
right.
matter. But
But
okay,
you
so we
still
have.
know enough about that you can like appreciate
I
the
do.
product for what it is.
I kind of hate that I do, but I also like it now. It is a kind of theater. It's
It
absolutely
is. It's absolutely theater. Yeah.
it is. So we have Lutheranism, we have wrestling, we have a disdain for AI that's shared between the two of
Yes.
us, as far as I know.
Absolutely. We can talk about that all day long if you want.
For sure.
But
But
yeah.
the thing that really struck me was also this chainmail hobby that you have.
Hey.
So I have this piece
So, getting back to the
kindly made.
wrestling, the reason I sent you that one
The
is
Scott Steiner
because
piece.
because that when I did it, I didn't bring out the other ones, but I started with with a heavy gauge, and I was just making a coif to make to look like Scott Steiner, really. And I found I like the first one. I'm like, oh no, this is way too like. And I'm looking at the photos, and I'm like, no, 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 this is way too heavy. This is actual like armor. And
Hmm.
so I worked my way down until that particular that particular weight of wire for the rings, and I was like, yep, that's it. That is exactly it. Which means like that wouldn't be any good at all to be
Here, let me
actual
put it
armor.
on. I'm gonna take my
Okay,
headphones off so I won't hear you, but go ahead, keep talking if you.
awesome.
Well, let me get
So
this.
yeah, so for those watching, this is just gotta
Hold on.
cover
This
the
is for my
hair.
hair more than anything. I look like a
But this was
hijabi confirmed, converting to Islam. Hold on.
so
Ugh.
that'll
I don't
oh
know if I'm
God,
putting it
that'll
on the
show
right
up
way or the
all
wrong way.
over.
Oh my God. Okay.
You no,
This thing intimidates me, I'm
it
not gonna
does
lie to
feel.
you.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
A little widow's peak thing there. Okay.
Merry Christmas. That was the thing that survived. Awesome. Does your husband like it? That was really kind of like for him. Does your husband like the Scott Steiner piece though?
He does. He was also because he also has very long hair, and we were
Oh,
both
okay.
intimidated by like how do we put this on? But I know this wouldn't have gone on like in the period. I don't think it would have gone on like just somebody's
Oh,
scalp.
probably not. No, again, I wasn't trying to be period with. Well, no, I was trying to be period with it, but not that period.
Sure. I feel like I'm going to do like a Halloween. Maybe I'll do Scott Steiner. Like I'll get the glasses. It'll be a thing. I'll do math. Um,
I remember, and I know like every year I do that, and it probably makes me seem like the biggest dork. But the reason that I remember that Scott Steiner Math Day is May 1st is because that's my mom's birthday. So because I found
as
out
if that
like
makes sense to say that. Why? Why would you
well
associate?
because when I saw like on on May 1st, Scott Steiner delivered, like when account just came across that organically, it immediately got burned into the same synapse of my mom's birthday and my friend Mickey's birthday, which are all
Oh,
on the same day. So it's like, well, okay, now I can't access one without the other.
well, there you go. Happy birthday, mom. No, so this
Spe-
is
So
it's
speaking
incredible. Hmm.
so speaking of, I at least owe you and I haven't gotten much more done. Although it's the sheet itself is almost done. I will still need to go back and get the design. But I owe you at least a
It
so
looks
there's
great.
I owe you at least a wearing. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take off my headphones for a second. Here.
Incredible. It looks much easier. It looks very dainty, actually, surprisingly.
Taking it off. The problem with it is that it is a bit back heavy. Like
Okay.
there is a fair. I mean, it's not heavy in and of itself, really. Not like when I was like the first one I tried to make was out of stainless.
Oh,
I got a little like I got about this much done of it, and I was like, no. So this is made out of mostly out of aluminum. This is like bright aluminum, and but it's still because of the geometry of it, most of the weight you do have like most of the weight. So keeping it, I had a I had the I had somebody from my church who wears mantillas as a matter of course,
Mhm.
um, like basically test drive it for me, and she said the same thing. She's like, you're probably gonna have to like pin it or something in the front to keep it
Hmm.
from sliding off the back. So
Okay.
again, this is very much a prototype. So but you agreed to it, so
I
here we are.
did. Well, I mean, it's a free gift. And so
Yeah,
just to segue into like you've been making these. Obviously, this is a different weave than
yeah,
I don't know if weave is the right
yep.
term
No,
here.
that's perfectly that's it.
Um,
That's the word.
so you've made these and you've gifted me with the Scott Steiner piece and another. First of all, why are you so kind? Or is it that you just like to make this and you're looking for somebody to give it to?
That's really it. I mean, I do like to just like do things to make people happy,
Sure.
but I also like, and it started with the baking thing, right? It's like if I, and you can
Mm,
see I need to make less things for baking, um, but because when if I do, I have to give them to somebody or else they're just gonna go here,
mm,
and so that's the thing. It's like I could keep making pieces ad infinitum. I've got
mm,
two other quaffs actually three other quaffs in my desk right now. Um, and so when I was like, I felt bad because I wanted to get this done for you by Christmas, and so I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna wear the Scott Steiner piece, and if I needed one, that actually was like really fast to make because the weave is so
interesting.
big. Well,
Hmm.
it's because the hoops are so big. It's not that many things to do. It's not that
Yeah,
many things to do. Whereas this is a three. These are 3 millimeter uh diameter rings, so it's just a lot more
sure. No,
fiddly
it
to
looks
get
so
it
much
going.
like a fabric. I was remarking as
Yeah.
you were putting it on how dainty it
Hmm.
almost looks.
Yeah.
Like it's
And that was my thought
surprising.
that was my thought when I was, because I'm very much it was in a, and still am really in an exploratory mode, and in a kind of like inventive mode. And and I was like, how small could I push this and how close could I get it to actual fabric?
Hmm.
And I actually tried with 2 millimeter rings. I've got a tiny little piece for that. That was I would finish that sometime probably after the heat death of the universe. So I went to three, and it was going slow still, but fast enough that I thought, well, I can actually finish this in a semi reasonable amount of time, and it still behaves like you said a lot like fabric.
Hmm.
It's not as chunky and clunky, but it does. And I know it's kind of it's the lighting is muted in here, but it does sparkle pretty well in like direct,
Yeah, no,
even
even on camera, I think it's showing up
yeah,
through Zoom. Not the
yeah,
best test of it, but it still looks very good. But you're saying this is faster, so I have no notion of how this
yeah.
is made.
Just
I'm not a historian of armor, unfortunately, and so I'm seeing this like I'm aware,
well, there
like
are
this is
reasons.
a
Yeah,
craft, but like how what does it go? What goes into the making of this? I guess for you.
well, for that I need to. I mean, obviously I'm not doing like ancient actual armors
Sure.
would be blacksmiths, and or would have access to blacksmiths who could then make refine metal and make wire
Mm.
of make wire of a certain grade, right, or a certain gauge, and such. I don't have to do any of that, so I can just go to Home Depot or order it or whatever. And so for the reduced workload that I have to do, I literally just have to go find the wire. Um, you could be really lazy and order the rings pre-made from certain uh, chainmail supply places, or you can get a little thing called a mandrel, which is essentially just a metal shaft on a crank that you can then basically spool your own wire with and cut them with
Mm.
wire cutters. And that is what we would call, to get into some nerd uh,
Love it. Yeah.
terms, butted rings as opposed to riveted rings.
Okay.
And so if you go and look, you do a little, a couple of Google searches. Butted rings are just really easy. You're just like, you've got a ring, it's cut, you kind of you bend it back into shape, and you kind of just basically get it as close as you can.
Hmm.
And you'll notice with that, occasionally like a stitch will fall out, but
Hmm.
it's a very regular pattern. So
Hmm.
it might be frustrating the first couple of times to figure out how it's supposed how to loop it back around its neighbors. But after that, that's a weave called European 4-in-1,
Okay.
which is like most actual, let's say, chainmail that you see people make. I mean, that's the fairly universal. Everybody learns on that.
Okay.
So and you'll see, you can, because they're butted rings and so they're not completely sealed off and closed. There's the possibility and the eventuality that some of them will come loose. You just
Got
have
it.
to string it back in. There
Hmm.
are, if you're really hardcore, and I'm not, you can actually rivet each ring
Hmm.
in a way to keep them closed. And that is a whole lot more work and
Hmm.
a whole lot more effort to plan and to do. And you can't do that with, I think, every material. So it's much more. So I am, I like my hobbies. I don't like the hobbies that much in that regard, right? It's like I didn't need to go down to that level of um authenticity, especially when I'm making a hood that a professional wrestler wore, So that's kind of my MO. It's like how I tend to in my hobbies, like where's the like min max, like where's the effort versus reward curve, and I get
Hmm.
up to there and maybe a little bit past there just so I can see where the maximum is, and
Sure.
then it's like okay, I don't need to, if I push it anymore, I'm really not getting anything out of it.
Hmm.
Um, really myself, other than wow, there's this really bizarre thing that I can do, and nobody else is, and it oftentimes slows down my ability to do other things. So,
Hmm.
um,
But I wonder if
another
that's a bad
hobby,
thing, to be, I mean, just thinking of slowing down and
yeah.
doing something. And I know, like, you're meaning also, like, you're losing progress on some of the other projects that you have. But
Hmm.
what does it look like for you to sit down on any given day and start weaving, I think is the term
Yeah,
we're using for the
yeah.
chainmail? Like, what does that look like?
Knitting is actually used an
Oh,
awful lot.
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
weaving works too. I mean, it's not really there's not a lexicon that you're held to, but it's really it ha happens when I've gone through the day, I've done the stuff that I need to do around the house with my job, and it's usually like after I've done something, if things have been a bit more stressful
Hmm.
than usual, in that it's like I can kind of sequester myself to my table, and I can't really put headphones on because, especially doing this,
Hmm.
because I've got like my head mounted magnifying glass
Hmm.
thing because these things are so small and I'm 51 and my eyes aren't that good. But I've got my Bluetooth speaker over here, and I'll usually have some music playlist going, and or sometimes I just feel like I'll have like one kind of lo-fi song going on and while
Hmm.
I'm doing it just to kind of bring me in, and it's and sometimes I'm using it to I end up thinking through a problem that I've got at work, or uh, which is usually, yeah, if I'm thinking about problems, that's what I'm usually doing. Or but a lot of the times it's just no thoughts, just vibes. No thoughts,
Hmm.
just move, pick up hoop, thread other hoop, pick up
Hmm.
next hoop, and get something get something made. At the end of it, I've got at least some progress on something. Um, like there was a story, and it's not really to like stave off depression, although it kind of is. Not really. And then the reason I bring that up is there was a story that was going around Twitter a few days ago, and I haven't checked the veracity of it, but that Winston Churchill used to actually lay bricks in his spare time. Like
Hmm.
he would go out and literally like work on a brick wall or something for a while, and that was his getting out of his own head and getting out of his normal stressful situation, or I think it was actually interesting to do with depression in that case,
Hmm.
and just do something that he knew how to do, that he could kind of focus on doing it well, but it didn't require a whole lot of problem solving skills.
Sure.
But just at the end of it, no matter how bad of a day he had or whatever he was working through, he'd made some progress on something physical, on something tangible. And there's something to that, I think.
I
Um,
agree. Yeah,
yeah.
you can see the actual progress that you've done.
Hmm.
I think this is why writing can be really frustrating, or other kinds of art too.
Yeah.
But even when you have a finished product, it doesn't feel finished, and you're not quite sure whenever
Hmm.
it's done because there's always more that can be fixed, and it feels a little more abstract. With something that's material, you can actually measure the progress, you can see it. And so if you're struggling with perhaps other kinds of problems, even more abstract ones that
Hmm.
feel unsolvable, you at least have evidence that you can
Hmm.
accomplish something. I feel this way about, it's not a hobby, but like the procrastination cleaning that I love to do. I love to do it because I'm like, it's measurable and I can
Yep.
feel better immediately, but I can also
Hmm.
see that I've done something and it doesn't take that long either. But this is it's an interesting craft, and I was really curious because I'm like, this has got to take, some amount of time, and certainly the other piece that you're working on
Hmm.
takes even more time. And I'm like, what is that? That's got to be, I hate the term therapeutic, but it's got to be, I don't know, meditative, or at
It
least
is.
helps you to think through something or not think about something, which gives you space to later maybe
Yeah,
work, revisit the problem
it
anew.
does. With the to bring in the AI issue,
Hmm.
because
Please,
of
yeah.
my job, um,
Which is
you
what,
know,
by the way, please
my I
describe.
my responsibility I'm an engineer at Textron Aviation, which is the Ersatz Cessna and or Beechcraft
Mm.
before they merged. But and my job is this is so like special. It's it's development assurance, and people are like, huh? And and how I got to describe it is it's like the system safety group, which I work really closely with. Actually, we're the same two sides of the same group. They deal with what happens if something breaks on the
Okay.
on an aircraft system. Is everything still going to be okay? If you lose a servo or you lose power to one of your displays or whatever, as you design they basically help they ensure that the aircraft is designed and built to a place where you have a fail-safe mentality. If something fails, you can still complete the flight, or you can at least get the aircraft down safely. Development assurance is because you have a bunch of software, you have a bunch of computer, you have a bunch of logic devices and software on it. What happens if you make a mistake in writing the software? Because when you're testing physical systems, and I'm sorry to completely be nerding out here,
You're fine.
um, but when you're testing physical systems, you can pretty much look at it and determine whether what it's supposed to do, right? You've got a pulley, you've got a lever arm, you've got even like an electrical servo or even a hydraulic pump, and with to move your landing gear or something. You can look at it and it's like, yes, it's supposed to move from here to here, and I know how it works. When you're writing software, not so much, because you can tell that software to do anything that you want it to do within the bounds of whatever output signal it has. So if it's a control signal to something, you know, you it's not necessarily intuitive that it's going to operate linearly from like A to B or whatever. So now you have to be super specific in what you tell it to do, and know that what you wrote or what's actually going on the airplane does what you tell it to do or does what it needs to do. And so it's kind of the process of I joke, and it's like, people say you've seen those memes of explain what you do badly, and it's like I make engineers show their work.
Hmm.
um and so in that's really the vague side of it. But what it is making sure that if you're going to be putting if you're going to be putting computerized process, things, and everything's computerized on an airplane nowadays.
Hmm.
Avionics on out. There's some control aspects to pretty much every system. Um, to make sure that you have done your due diligence and all of the software that you've written conforms to these standards for for how well it's supposed to operate, or how much stuff you have to do to check it before it can actually go on a delivered airplane.
Okay.
So with all of
With
that,
that,
with
yes.
all of that, I also have to deal with now people are wanting to use, say, AI, which is a horrible term. The real thing, machine learning. LLMs are machine learning. You've got an algorithm, and you've trained, and in that case, you've trained it on a bunch of language, and
Hmm.
now it actually knows how to kind of fill the patterns in the language. But they're using the same process. They're trying to use that to develop other functions on an airplane, which sounds scary, right? Because it is. But
You're gonna make me scared of
functions.
flying now.
Well, no, I mean,
Maybe we shouldn't
and
talk
it's
about
all
this.
it's all no, it's all like advisory stuff now, like
Hmm.
having some sort of artificial vision system to see if they're to help the pilot see in like uh, bad weather conditions if there's another plane on the runway as you're coming into land or something like that. You know, stuff that's not directly in control of the airplane yet.
Okay.
But but the problem with that is that my job then you really can't do it
Hmm.
because you don't have, you know, you train it, but you don't have like a code base that you can trace back to the stuff that it's supposed to the requirements that it's supposed to do. And so now you've got this kind of black box that, well, it does what it does, and we think it does it well enough. And I'm like, no, that's not good enough. You have to do this. And so because of that, I'm on a couple of different industry groups about, all right, how are we going to actually prove that this stuff works? Because
Hmm.
people are going to use it. So how do we make sure that it's safe? You know, how to make sure that it's safe to actually use and it'll do what it's supposed to do and it doesn't do anything it's not supposed to do. And because of that, yeah, those are the problems that I take to the chainmail. That's at the end of the day. It's always something to do with, okay, there's something going on in this, you know, this particular issue with this aspect of it, and I don't want to nerd out too much more, but those are the problems that I end up, you know, those are the thoughts that on those days when I do have to process something that I'm working on.
Sure.
So I'm sorry, there's a long lead up for a very brief payoff. But
No, no, I don't think it's. I think it's useful, and I think it's a good exercise, like the making of it and the thinking, or like
hmm
productively not thinking, so you can come back later and think about the issue more.
yeah.
What AI seems to promise, or LLMs, I think it's. I
hmm
agree. I think AI, the artificial intelligence label suggests that we're dealing with something that is,
Yep.
I don't know, comparably human, maybe. I'm not sure what.
It's a misnomer. It's and if you look at like the formal definitions for AI out there, you can stretch it for it encompasses so much that there's a whole bunch of stuff that is completely deterministic that you could reasonably under those definitions call AI.
Hmm.
Like a normal autopilot for and I have to work on airplanes because when all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail.
Hmm.
Um, like a normal autopilot, which you could like literally make out of the out of the same vacuum technology that's your cruise control on your car would technically be considered AI because it's
Hmm.
doing something, you know, you if you really applied like the the loosest definition of AI, which is
Okay.
why I like to when we're talking about especially recently I would much rather use the term machine learning because like that encompasses neural networks and other like different configurations of it, but it's all I don't want to code something. I've got a mountain of data. I want to turn that into something that I think will be useful.
Hmm. So what
So,
gets lost in the knit? Like what, in your opinion, well, I can think of like my introduction to LLMs and ChatGPT in
mhm,
particular was this was coming about when I was also teaching university writing. And so I have seen essay output. I wasn't seeing a whole lot of it at first because ChatGPT was really in a kind of infantile stage with its ability to produce sophisticated writing. I still wouldn't say it's sophisticated, but it can produce a better, I don't want to say better. It's not like 3 sentences per paragraph, 5 paragraphs. That's it. It's now a little more robust in what ideas it's trying to wrestle with, or at least, just kind of spitting out. But where am I going with this? What gets lost in what gets lost in you have this mountain of data you need to code, or you have a series of, let's say, quotes mandatory to put into your essay or things that you want to communicate, give it to the LLM,
mhm.
let it do the thing. We can't really do that. I mean, I guess I wonder if it's similar to 3D printing. Maybe that's a separate question of like giving something to a machine and like it's just going to put it out. But what's getting lost when you're not
You know,
putting the links together, so to speak, when you're
so that
not making the code yourself, when you're not writing every single word?
that's an interesting comparison because when 3D printing, you have a detailed configuration file, right? You have a map file that it's printing to, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to set all that up. And in fact, you have to do test runs and you have to make sure that and I haven't done 3D printing. I have friends who do.
Mm-hmm.
So I know all this stuff by, you know, by proxy, but you know, you have to make sure that it's got the plate to build it on and the different and the bit structures. There's a bunch of stuff that you have to do and you know you have to do. So
Mm-hmm.
all the information is still there. of how to do it. You still have to do it. You still have to have a detailed description of what it is you want to print. That's the difference. That's the thing.
Hmm.
When you're trying to do machine learning, you have a behavior you're trying to capture, and you might be able to even define that behavior in some nominal way, in some set of requirements or whatever. But at the end of the day, you're kind of trusting that all of this data will fit the thing that you're wanting it to do. And
Hmm.
you don't have a direct way to test that at conclusively for its entire basically range of operations, right? So there might be some place in there it might behave perfectly fine 99% of every condition that it's going to encounter, and in that one it might just completely go haywire, and you might not ever come across it, or you might come across it on the first test.
Hmm.
But you can't really prove without help, or in a lot of cases, if you get a machine learning model that's high enough dimensionality, we would say, you have enough things going into it, you can't really mathematically prove that any of that stuff isn't there. The
Hmm.
other thing, and so that's the one thing. That's the black box aspect of it. I can't look inside and see how it works.
Hmm.
I have a bunch of numbers that represent a matrix that was trained into, but I have no way to know what affects what, or how to test it to make sure that it's actually doing what I want it to do all the time, or that it's not going to freak out on me somewhere. The other thing is that, especially, this is a big danger with LLMs, and this is another thing that I'm getting into in my industry committees, because now people are using this for, hey, I can use an LLM to write my requirements. Okay, all right. Well, I can use it to validate my requirements to make sure that they're complete and correct. Because an LLM, the the LLM's limitations are right there in the name, large language model. And you've probably seen this as a teacher, who had to deal with at least some LLM written material. Language model does not mean truth model.
Hmm.
It is literally just trying to find, you give it the prompts of particular words, and it looks for the next word that fits grammatically has in, and has a probabilistic chance of being the correct next word for whatever the query is. But
Hmm.
it does not ever go back and check to make sure it's right. I don't know how many things have we seen, and I always repost them on Twitter anytime these come across, right? Of set up, prompt, execute, the thing fails, and the next problem is, I told you not to do this, and the LLM comes back with, you're right, and you're right to be mad about it. I'm like, you know it's it's not intelligent.
Hmm.
That's the language it's learned in when it gets the I screwed up language. When it gets an I screwed up prompt, of course it's gonna, it's learned and they're just gonna get more weaselly as they get more training data. They're gonna
Yeah.
imagine an LLM arguing with you like a typical Twitter argument goes. That's where it's going to end up
Well, I've argued with some bots, I
converging.
think, in my time, but yeah, there's a sycophantic nature to AI. But I'm really curious, and I'm struck because I would wonder, or I would hope rather, that people in, let's say, STEM generally, but engineering, whatever
Hmm.
you would, whoever else you're working with, maybe not
Hmm.
just engineers. I should hope that maybe people in that field would be more aware of the pitfalls of AI and perhaps be more skeptical of its usage, especially for, and I hope I'm understanding your profession correctly, like double checking safety features for
Hmm.
flights and in airplanes. I would hope that you'd be able to sit around and be around people who are recognizing, okay, like yes, it can only do so much, but it's going to hallucinate information, it's going to do
Hmm.
X, Y, Z, and yet it seems like you're still up against a lot of
Hmm.
enthusiasm about its usage. And that's something that's bothered me on the education end. Seeing universities suddenly, almost like in tandem, capitulate to AI as if it's this inevitable force that we
Hmm.
must bow to, something akin to like the calculator or the printing press. it's confusing to me how on board and evangelistic people seem to be about AI. I'm not sure if you've encountered that kind
Oh
of
yeah.
attitude.
Oh no. I've got it. I don't want to speak too much about my own employment
Of course, of
situation,
course.
but let's just say that there have been some internal forces. And I think every company, nobody wants to be left behind, right? Nobody wants
Hmm.
to, in the case that it actually does provide this great increase in productivity, nobody wants to be the last one there, right?
Hmm.
And so everybody's doing it kind of at risk, which is my two least favorite terms as a safety adjacent person.
Hmm.
Um, but you're right. Like, in fact, so these committees that I'm on are people that recognize that we'd have to put bounds on these tools. We have to be able to people are, first of all, we're cynical enough. People are going to use these tools, especially people, that are fresh out of college who have some degree of at least experience in doing writing prompts and getting acceptable behavior out of large language models. Um, how do we, you know, how do we set up the bounds to let them use the tool because they're going to use it anyway, but give them enough guidance that they don't that they that they that they don't allow mistakes generated by that to propagate. And that's easier. And here's the real problem is that that's easier for us because we've done the work for like us older, the older
Hmm.
tier of the engineers. And I can't believe I'm putting myself in there, but here we are. Um, but because we've done the work by hand or in deterministic math, methods. We know what goes into it. We know where the common mistakes are, so we know what to check. We have experience to check where the most likely mistakes could be or where the most impactful mistakes would be. Once you've got a generation coming up that has not done that on their own,
Hmm.
that's when then they don't, even if they say, no, I'm going to take the time and I'm going to check it, they don't have the experience to really know what are the places that could break the worst or what the obvious where something is broken. They may not
Hmm.
even recognize something is broken because they've never done it themselves. And like almost daily on X, I've got a few. I can't believe I just called it X. Daily on Twitter because I have resisted that because they had one of the most recognizable brands in the universe, and Elon Musk just decided, no, no,
I
it's
go back and
Twitter,
forth. It's really subconscious. I do have to like force myself to say post instead of tweet, but
right?
it doesn't matter. Anyway,
Anyway,
so you're
but
saying.
going
Mhm.
back, like every day, there's something about programmers and how large language models are basically decaying coders' abilities to do their own
Mm.
job,
Hmm.
right? To diagnose their own job, find their own bugs, and so that's the sort of that's the real risk of this going forward. Is
Hmm.
there a way it can be used? It can be used intelligently, absolutely. Can I trust that the following generations, and this is not these youngins are stupid, and this isn't just blatant ageism here. This
Hmm.
is actually just the wisdom of having seen when things get too easy, in the past, and knowing, hey, this is something you need to look out for.
Mm. I think this yeah, the foresight of looking into the next generation is nothing. Yeah, I haven't heard anybody really speak in that way. Um, when I've heard this idea of like, well, everyone's going to use AI, so we need
Hmm.
to teach them how to use it responsibly. It reminds me of the whole like I'm going to let my kids smoke weed in the house because at least I know that they're doing it here and I know what they're smoking. But I mean, to continue the weed metaphor, I suppose. It reminds me like you're saying,
Hmm.
you and a class of people who know how to do things because you have expertise and you've done the manual work. I guess you've done the nitty-gritty work in order to know when things are going wrong and you can double check that. And the next generation may not, especially if they're getting this crutch of AI. To continue the weed metaphor, it's like hearing like, boomers and above talk about people smoking weed today, or like the legalization of marijuana, as if it's
Hmm.
this kind of like, who cares kind of a thing, not understanding No, like marijuana today has such higher levels of THC, it's making people literally crazy. The addiction levels are
Hmm.
off the charts. Now everything
Yep.
smells like weed, right? And so how am I relating this to AI in my very loose analogy here that maybe got off
It
the
makes
rails?
complete sense to me.
I appreciate it. Well, I agree. I think the mindset that we can just teach people to use it responsibly,
Hmm.
it doesn't bear out when we're seeing this devastating literacy crisis, people just
Hmm.
not knowing how to read. And is that only AI's fault? No, but I
Hmm.
think it's just skyrocketed because when you're not writing for yourself habitually, like long form, you are not learning how to articulate your thoughts. You're not
Hmm.
doing the slow, patient work. Something like, this, but with right. I'm serious. I think
Yeah,
it's
no.
connected, and that you need to put in the kind of grueling work that is it makes you feel impatient, but it's necessary because if you're not doing it, then you don't acquire the skills that you need. And then there is no crutch. I mean, you can use a crutch if you have some, let's say, muscle to work with, but if you're totally
Hmm.
atrophied because you've never worked it in your life, that we're
Hmm.
not dealing with something that's an assistant now. It's you're
It's
carried.
replacing it. Yeah.
Right, by this technology that, as you're noting, is not very smart to begin with. I remember when I was first looking into it, there was a whole meeting of the instructors of the university writing program at Columbia, and the heads of it were like, this is going to be writing dissertations one day. People are laughing at me. I'm saying that it may, and I think
Yeah.
you can produce probably an amount of text long enough to be a dissertation, but I've asked it, like analyze this or like give me like a 5 paragraph essay on this particular text and it will just invent
Hmm.
invent whole books
Yep.
very convincingly if you have no notion of what you're talking about. Like if you have no expertise in the thing, you'll see a quote from a scholar and there's a book cited and a page number and you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense,
Hmm.
except the quote
It.
doesn't exist. It hasn't been written anywhere else. I've even
Hmm.
like search the exact phrasing, the book doesn't exist, so there's no page number to
Hmm.
go with it. Maybe it's citing somebody who's real, but he's been dead
It,
for a while. Like
it
it's
it looks plausible,
right.
but
It looks
it
plausible if you don't have the expertise, and we're
right
training people not to have expertise
expertise.
and to rely on the thing that
Hmm.
regularly hallucinates information. But this is so well known, and yet, as I said earlier, and as we talked about, people are still really like gung ho about using AI, and that I don't know. I don't know what conspiracy there is to promote AI
Yeah.
usage, but it doesn't make sense to me how people who would be the most poised to understand its pitfalls are so enthusiastically promoting the technology.
I think it probably has to do with there are a group of people who are smart enough to know what they don't know,
Hmm.
right? And there have been throughout history these technologies that have really been quantum leaps forward. You mentioned the printing press
Hmm.
and so, the personal computer, things like that. And nobody wants to, and everybody's been just been immersed in those cases in those test cases or what for so long that now this one seems like the obvious fit, and nobody wants to, it's kind of FOMO, right? It's kind of
Mm.
like academic or you know uh, opportunity FOMO, and so they're willing to take a risk, um, because if it pans out, then at least they're not behind, right? Now, I think, and you're starting to see this already. I'm not black pilled on this, to use another Twitter term, right?
Hmm.
Um, we're going to have a rough patch in here, but I think that you're going to see you're going to start seeing negative results, hopefully in much lower stakes things than airplanes.
Hmm.
Um, you're going to start seeing, well, I like there was the story that was going around, or that I saw. I think it was on. I'm sorry that all my sources are from Twitter, but um, because that's where I get most of my news nowadays. Um, the story about colleges that are going back to oral exams, or we've probably
Mm.
seen this in different places. That's that is a healthy reaction to it. I think that's it might seem like to some people a real throw up your hands moment of just giving up, but no, I think that is a an acknowledgement of, this has been detrimental to to our students actually acquiring and using the knowledge that we're supposed to be teaching them, that they're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be learning. We're not supposed to be gaming the system to get an A in college, to get your degree.
Mm-hmm.
And you could talk about social issues all the way back into the 80s and before, about how it suddenly became expected that you would get a college degree to get any sort of job, and how trades the trades have fallen out of favor, or had until recently, and all this, and all of the factors that play into this. But having that reaction of, these students are actually supposed to know this, so let's do something to make sure that we know, that make our best. It's kind of like my job to assure that they
Mm-hmm.
know the information that they're supposed to know. and and the more experience, I don't think it's going to take very long, um that to for people to see, oh, this didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
This didn't work for, and it's not going to, like, AI's, LLMs. I'm going to just go to LLMs. LLMs are
Mm-hmm.
not going to go away. LLMs have purposes, but I think it's going to get refined to what those purposes are, and things are going to improve because people are going to they're going to figure out how to kind of piggyback an LLM with something that maybe does do the fact checking, some sort of deterministic, uh, programming or whatever, that actually goes, hey, I made a claim. Let's make sure that claim is right. Test it, and kick it back. I
Mm-hmm.
know, this is complete supposition on my part, but people are inventive, and when you've got a tool that has some potential, you don't just throw it away at the first sight of at the first trouble. So
Mm-hmm.
there's my pro AI argument, I guess.
Okay.
It's going to end up it's going to end up being used and being useful and being successful, but there's the dangerous ground of really incorporating the information, and what's the cost of using it poorly, of
Mm-hmm.
using it wantonly, as opposed to use the term. um you know and that's going to be where the uncomfortable, you know, that's going to be the dangerous ground here while we figure that stuff out. I have one colleague so um, who is so worried about it that she says that she's going to stop flying in like 5 years, and she's another
Don't
aerospace
tell me that.
engineer.
Don't
Yeah,
tell me
well,
that.
but she's only one, and she's got a point. If things break the wrong way, especially, with some of the things that could possibly happen out of the industry, um, you know, you may we make a joke. It's not a very good joke, but there is in aviation, especially, you could go back and look at almost every change in regulations is tied to some accident that happened.
Hmm.
Um, and when you're in systems, in my discipline, whenever there is an aircraft accident, that's from anywhere, not just on our airplanes, but anyone.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you end up talking about for the next couple of weeks is,
Hmm.
okay, what do you think happened, or what does it look like, and you know, or do you think it was a system failure, or do you think it was pilot error, or whatever. You end up getting kind of this morbid fascination with it out of necessity, because that's
Hmm.
your job, is to prevent
Sure.
these things. Um, and we make a joke about the blood tax. So, we didn't know that we needed to look at this. We didn't know that this needed to be regulated until this accident occurred, and somebody had to pay the blood tax for this. And it's
Oh.
really, yeah, it's a bit morbid, but that's it. But it also, I like the term because it does highlight what's at stake
Mm-hmm.
in our job. And the people that I know, and what's funny is that, like, the people that I know that do system safety, on aircraft, and development assurance for that matter, there's a, I don't know, I haven't done a real good survey, but there's a lot of devout religious people in those groups, because, and
Hmm.
I think they have a um they have a real sense of what they're actually doing and what's at stake. It's them flying, it's their loved ones flying. When they were talking about rules for regulations for airplanes, I mean, that's for You don't that's it's not stuff you mess around with because you're going to put your every time we go to a conference, we're putting ourselves on the line doing this.
Hmm.
And our loved ones anytime, we care about what we do and we know what's at stake. And so um I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's
Blood tax of
blood tax. Yeah, the so
mhm.
there's going to be a blood, so the blood tax, I'm hoping that the blood tax for the use of large language models and AI and machine learning, is not as bad as it. I'm hoping it's on the. I'm hoping we don't have to pay it, or no, I'm hoping it's not very bloody. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
but you never know until that first mistake that makes people pay attention.
I think that's the key is like what's going to be the thing that makes people pay attention because right now I think I've alluded to the literacy crisis, which I think is
Hmm.
multivariate. We've been moving since the age of the television to a more
Hmm.
image-based
Hmm.
series of communications. And still, you have people reading, but with short form video now having taken off and been underway for a while, I think LLMs were the next step of not people already being unfamiliar with or not used to articulating themselves in writing to just reading long form to having attention already cut so short
Hmm.
that I think having something that will think on your behalf was just the natural next step. So I'm not going
Yeah.
to say that the literacy crisis is totally dependent on AI and that if we got rid of that, then there wouldn't be any
Hmm.
other issues. But I think that when you have so many educators, not the administrators who are promoting AI, but the people who are actually boots on the ground teaching and being like, yeah,
Hmm.
people don't know how to read or write anymore. That already seems like we've got some blood.
Yeah.
There's already some bleeding going up, and I'm wondering what it will take, at least the education side of things, for people to really pull back on the use of AI, the endorsement of it at least, and say, okay, yeah, this has actually been a net negative, which I think
Hmm.
it will bear out to be, at least in many aspects of education. But yeah, it's a good question. Like, what is going to be the thing that's noticeable? When will there be enough blood spilt
Yeah.
for the blood tax for it to register as an issue? Yeah, I don't know. I hate to speculate, but
Yeah.
it's a good question.
Just pray that it's as little, keep praying that it's little as much as is necessary, I guess.
Hmm.
That's the only thing only thing that he can do is do what you can do. In my case, I've made jokes that that I'm not afraid of Roko's basilisk because it's going to kill me first, regardless. Just because of my position on the AI committee and what I've said, it's like
Hmm.
there's no coming back from that. It's gonna come get me, and I await it with open arms, I suppose. I have because my confidence is in something else anyway.
Sure.
So, um, but I think we're starting to see it and here's my a little bit more of a white pill moment. Like my son is 23 and he did 1 year in college and didn't do very well because school first of all he graduated during COVID. So
Ooh.
like his last 2 years of high school were just a mess,
Mm.
right? Or his last year and a half, right when high school is supposed to be getting good, right?
Hmm.
When
Yeah.
you're finally comfortable with things.
Hmm.
And you could also make comments about the public school system in various places, and we don't have that much time for me to go off on that. But but since then, we've all heard all these talks about Gen Z this, Gen Z that, and Gen Z is horrible and whatever, about the TikTok brain and everything else.
Hmm.
But seeing from him, and I know this is anecdotal, right? But it's with him and his kind of cohort, they're kind of they've pulled themselves back. Like they've he actually goes out and spends physical time with friends like multiple times a week, which is something that Gen Z apparently just doesn't do nowadays, but
Hmm.
they do. Um there's the talk I saw today about Gen Z is drinking less alcohol. Well, that's probably better than the binge drinking that Gen X did back in the day. But it's not like but you know
They might be
my
smoking more weed. I'm not trying to black
no
pill here, but that might
no.
also be the issue.
Well, I don't know about that because that's starting to like people are figuring that out too.
Hmm.
That this, that now that it's been commercialized, it's no longer as safe as it used to be, and now things are just, it's not as fun when it.
It's also not as cool, I think. Like the
Right.
whole like hidden aspect,
Yeah.
forbidden element to like seeming transgressive and
Hmm.
rebellious is gone, and
Yeah.
so yeah, that
But
I guess that's been erased as well.
to my point though is that I think Gen Z is starting to see where where they're not growing, right? Where
Hmm.
they're not so fatalistic about things, and I've seen it in my son, and I've seen it in his friends, and I've seen it in other places, and I've read it from our friends or MUFOs or whatever we want to call them on Twitter, right? The same thing of they're kind of rejecting. Okay, this is they see this trajectory and they're like, no, that's or they just maybe more to the point, they get bored with this to a certain point. Everything automated for me isn't any fun. So I'm gonna put this down and I'm gonna go do something, something physical, something analog. Back to your
Right.
point.
Back
Yeah,
to your hobby, really. I think
yeah,
this is, to bring it full circle here. I think this is
yeah.
one of the beautiful things about this. Like, yes, you've made something that looks very cool, and it is very cool. But there is something lost when you're outsourcing your thinking to a
Hmm.
machine, or just even if you're
Yeah.
not thinking about anything at all. But then so much to be gained, even when you're just doing something, as you're saying, like it's for fun. You're not
Hmm.
selling this. You're not staking your whole life on this. You're doing it as you noted, to the extent that it is still enjoyable for you to do. You're not going to make yourself miserable over your hobby. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that there's something being regained, or hopefully being regained,
Hmm.
when you start to get this restlessness that comes with, I think, having too easy of a life. Like, there's not enough friction. You're not thinking for yourself. You're not going out and being uncomfortable, having,
Hmm.
risking awkward conversation, or risking being bad at something, which is something that I still struggle with, to be honest with you. I don't like to be confronted with my own fallibility, but
I've gotta baking. Go
yeah.
go go do baking. I was like, because this is so this plays actually really well into like probably my primary negative personality trait. So the thing that drove so many bad decisions in my life was just having this really wrong-headed idea of learning,
Hmm.
of like being good at something. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had this, and this is a fairly common problem when you grow up and they label you something. In this case, they label you gifted, right?
Hmm.
It's not to humble brag, I've achieved. No, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was in, a fairly small school district, and it's not like I had separate classes with everyone else, but I got to go do separate things. And you get some people you get the people who are gifted at different things, right? And so you end up with this idea that, oh, I'm gifted in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that I should be doing. Or if I don't do something and I don't do it good enough right away, um, then I need to stop doing it, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm a failure in some sense. There's I don't know if you've ever seen, it's an old movie and it's kind of a bad movie. It was called Young Sherlock Holmes. It was in the 80s. And like the very first scene of Young
Yes,
Sherlock Holmes,
Watson, he has like these little pastries that come to life and attack
yes,
him, right? Okay, that's
yes.
the only thing I remember
Well,
from that film.
when they introduce Holmes, early on, he's playing the violin and playing it horribly,
Mm.
and he kind of say throws it down. He kind of pulls it down from his chin in disgust, and he goes, "Should have mastered the damn thing by now." And he's only been doing it for like 2 hours or something.
Mm.
You know, it's but that like is the best encapsulation I can think of that, like that mentality, and then I read a book, um, that kind of started me recovering from this. And I won't give away how old I was when I really finally started to recover from this, but it was probably older than you. Um,
I still
but
haven't figured out how to learn
well,
properly and not get stressed out about it, so
well,
please.
I read a book called The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, who is, um, who was a national chess, or like I don't think he ever made grandmaster, but he made international master. But he's the guy that, if you ever heard of the movie or read the book, or the book Searching for Bobby Fischer,
Hmm.
that's who that movie is about, is Josh
Oh,
Waitzkin.
okay.
Um, and I think his dad actually wrote the book. Um, maybe, yeah. And yeah, he was this chess prodigy who then got burnt out on it, and that he literally went to go do so, and he just decided, I'm going to go do something else. And the something else that he did, that he learned, was Tai Chi.
Hmm.
And like competing in because you can there actually are Tai Chi tournaments, like actual,
Okay.
combat tournaments, because it is in fact a martial art. It's not just something that old people like me do, to for flexibility. Um, and he chronicled kind of the whole his whole transition of making that change in his own mind in the
Hmm.
course of this book. And that's what really got me going. But what really cemented it for me personally was was baking, because
Hmm.
I'd learned the basics of chocolate chip cookies and such, from my mom, right?
Sure.
And so chocolate chip cookies are the my original comfort food.
Hmm.
And everyone was like, "Oh, you're such a good baker," and I was like, "I knew to make like three things, but I made them well."
Yeah.
And then I sat down to watch. This was, and this dates me again too, like the first season of the Great British Bake Off.
Hmm.
And I've kind of bought into my own hype, to some point. Oh yes, I'm a decent baker. I sat down, like the first halfway through the first episode, I'm like, I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. And so now I'm like, okay, well, now I have to learn. I have to at least, get some chops, because man, I don't know what this is and this and this is. And so I
Hmm.
go in this deep dive, and and then I started screwing things up, you know, and you learn. And then I learned along the way, and of course, the first few of these I took completely personally. But I finally got to and I think it was Veronica, my wife, was like, "You're out some eggs. You're out some eggs and some flour. You have more and some time. Okay. Did
Hmm.
you learn something from this?" And I'm like, "I guess." The story I like to tell is, the worst possible thing happened to me when I made macarons for the first time. They came out perfect. And the second time, and they came out the second time. And I'm like, I obviously know how to make macarons now. Done and dusted. And so then when a friend of mine a couple of months later asked me to make like 300 macarons for her wedding, I'm like, sure, I can make
Oh
macarons.
my goodness. That
And then I
stresses me
start
out thinking
and then
about it.
and then I start making the shells, and then like, why are they cracking? Why are they blowing? Why does that one look like a mutant? What's going on? And I had to like stop after like my third or fourth botched, batch. I like took it. I sat down and told my wife, I may not just be able to do this. And Veronica was like, she sat and gave me a pep talk. She's like, "You're, you know, you did this before. Just figure out what's wrong. You know, address the problem. You know, you know, one link at a time. Eat the
Hmm.
elephant. Eat the elephant one bite at a time,
Hmm.
and get back in there." And yeah, and then I kind of diagnosed the problem, got back, started coming out, got it all done. It was a beautiful wedding and everything done. And that like a whole event kind of ran me through the whole gamut of emotions, and got me to, like, now I have some confidence, because I know like all of the things that I can adjust.
Hmm.
And what did it cost me? Some time and some eggs, some almond flour, and then I was like, at that point, then I would make something and it would screw up, and I'd be almost a little excited about it. Like, oh, okay. All right.
Hmm.
What did I find out? You know, it's like, oh, this sucks that I don't have, I don't have the cream puffs that I wanted to make, but now I have information, and it taught me how to learn, and it taught me how to fail properly.
Hmm.
right? It taught me how to take, and I say it taught me how to fail. It really is it taught me how to process failure properly.
Sure, we're using failure, and I think
Yeah.
the point of baking, yeah, I mean, or with anything in life, yeah, the final product might matter sometimes. You know, you're making for a
Hmm.
wedding. Ultimately, the final product would matter in that instance,
Hmm.
but generally, there's so many times where I think we get so focused, or I certainly get so focused on the final product, and if it's
Hmm.
not precisely how I envisioned it or wanted it to be, even if I don't even have a precise vision, it's like, oh, it doesn't seem
Right.
good enough, and
It,
so
there's
the
no way
whole
that I can be done with this. I
right.
understand
And
that.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, the whole point for me, I think my approach has been wrong, that I'm envisioning the final product and what is that going to be rather than understanding, as you're describing in baking, but also in your profession, like you need to understand what's going wrong. If there's a mistake, how do
Hmm.
you know how to go back and fix it? And the more failures you have, the better informed you are about your craft,
Hmm.
the better learner that you become, just kind of in any
Hmm.
area of life. Um, I think there's a real beauty in that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the time you've given me. I know
Yep.
I hopefully haven't interfered with any of your plans, but I think we've had a pretty robust conversation. Thanks again for the chainmail and
Yeah.
for the conversation. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Anytime. See you on Twitter, I guess. And
Yep. See you on Twitter.
next time we'll talk about cocktails and wrestling.
Perfect combo. Love it. All right.
All right.
Thank you. Take
Thanks.
care.
See you, Megan.